Have you ever had that moment where an old friend comes to mind and you want to reach out, but you're not sure how they're going to react? In this episode, we're talking about how to reconnect with an old friend without making it weird and get that clarity you're looking for right up front. Let's go. Welcome back to Accidentally Intentional, where we are on a mission to break through surface level connection and build deep, meaningful friendships. Throughout adulthood, people come and go in our lives as the seasons change. But one of the questions I often get asked is, how do I reconnect with an old friend? In fact, I actually just got to contribute to a Success Magazine article answering this exact question. So I'm going to break down the 5 steps I would say that are going to help you the most in order to reconnect without feeling super weird about the whole thing. Step 1 is to go first in reaching out to them. Instead of having these thoughts swirling in our mind of, oh, I miss them. Oh, I wonder if they miss me. Do they think about me? Anything like that. Why don't we just go first and reach out to them to find out? And there are some important steps that need to be taken and some important ways of phrasing things when you make that initial reach out and go first to reconnect with that person. And the first one that I would say is don't reach out and say, hey, miss you, hope you're well. The hope you're well phrase feels in a way like a polite dismissal because it's not actually a question. You're just like, hey, thought of you, see you later. So I always say, if you're going to connect with somebody, definitely start by telling them the truth. Hey, I was just thinking about you because, and explain why you thought of them. Or you could just simply say, hey, I was just thinking about you. And the very next thing to do, right behind that sentence, is say something that has a time frame to it. A sentence like this. Hey, I was just thinking about you because I was riding this roller coaster and I remember the first time we rode it like 8 years ago, and I realized that I miss you and I would love to know if you have availability in the next 3 weeks for us to catch up, grab coffee, grab lunch. Now, I'm riffing, right? But the goal is you're putting a time frame within it to show that you are serious about this. This isn't just one of those like, we should catch up sometime. Yeah. And then that day never comes because it's not a day in the calendar. Therefore, it's not a priority. So put it with a time specific element to it. Or if the person is not near you, you can adapt this same kind of dialogue for FaceTime, video chats, phone call, whatever, but put a specific time frame around it. And what will happen is if they don't have capacity in the next 3 weeks, they can either be like, you know what, I'm on a trip, blah, blah, blah. What about next week? Or if they don't respond, then unfortunately we might have some painful clarity. And that might be telling us, without telling us, that they aren't necessarily interested in pursuing that friendship any longer. Or we could circle back one more time because I'm one of those people who, first thing in the morning, I have this terrible habit of checking my phone, reading text messages, waking up, getting out of bed then after I've already read my text messages and completely forgetting to text those people back. So we have to be willing to give some grace there. But the thing is, when we are trying to reconnect with someone, ultimately, we're trying to get clarity at the same time with how do they feel? Do they want to reconnect? Or do they still find that I'm worth their time because they're worth my time? So it's this whole inner dialogue, but it's going to be a little nerve-wracking because we're trying to get to the root of it instead of just making up stories in our mind about what we think they're still thinking or not thinking about us present day. So step 2 is ditch the highlight reel and kind of look to skip the recap. You know how you have a catch-up conversation and it's basically like, how are you? Especially as people start having kids, how are the kids? What are they into now? And the conversation still feels surfacey, but it's as if you had a conversation with someone where basically you verbally just looked at their Instagram highlight reel and didn't really know like the ins and outs of what was going on in their life. So a way that you can skip the highlight reel and go for deeper connection right from the beginning is asking better questions. Here's a couple good questions that you can ask to start a richer dialogue. 1, what has been something that's been super life-giving for you recently? And by that, I'm just asking, what is something that excites you recently? Another version could be, what is something that you've been thinking about a lot recently? Because you're not saying it has to be good or bad. You just genuinely want to hear what's on their mind in life. And Asking meaningful questions is so important in order to deepen the relationship or pull it back to giving it a glimpse of what it used to be. You know how you have those friends where you haven't seen them for years and then you use the phrase, we pick up right where we left off? That's because there's that richness in the level of friendship that you've been able to do that. And all you need to do is go right back to that place when it comes to those meaningful questions, and you can reopen that and continue that conversation there. Now, that's important to go for those meaningful questions too, because someone could be in a different phase of life right now, and you might learn that they are not on that same page as you anymore. For instance, this actually happened to me recently. A friend from years ago I reconnected with, and when I was starting to have conversations with her that used to be conversations we had all the time, she wasn't really into it anymore. And that didn't tell me, oh, she doesn't want to be friends anymore. It actually told me she's in a very different stage and phase of life that we aren't necessarily thinking about the same way. Now, it's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing. But it gave me that context that I needed. And when it comes to asking meaningful questions and deepening the conversation, well, I have to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Party Cues, which is the #1 conversations app in the App Store and Google Play. And it's for good reason. Party Cues is a free app that has over 2,000 questions between 15 different categories that you can use to guide a conversation to get to know someone in your life a whole lot better. What I love about it is that I don't have to leave the house and remember, oh, I have to take my box of cards with me. I have it right on my phone. And because it's free, I can pull it up at any moment, put it in the middle of the table, putting my phone on Do Not Disturb so that someone knows, hey, let's discuss this. I want to know your thoughts on this. All of a sudden, we're in a conversation I never expected or imagined. And if you're someone who gets super, like paranoid of like, oh, what if I'm awkward? This is the answer, because Party Cues punches awkward silence in the mouth. It helps you fill the gap so that it's a bridge to those meaningful conversations in your life. And like I said, it's free. You should download it right now in the App Store and Google Play. And also, they have a free web version of it too. And if you are someone who, wants to take a digital detox, they actually have a card game coming later this year. So head to partycues.com to download it or grab the party pack right now. Tell them Zoe sent you. I promise you, it is going to deepen all the relationships in your life this year. Step 3 is don't microwave the friendship. And by that, I mean that if there's some distance that's been created intentionally or unintentionally between this person that you're trying to reconnect with, don't have the expectations that things are immediately going to be right where they left off. We talked about it earlier about how there are friends like that, but you don't necessarily need to have the expectation that that will happen with everyone, because with distance, that can also take away an element of trust, because all of us are continuing to grow, evolve, and changes. So sometimes that needs to be reestablished. And so you need to give yourself grace and give the other person grace as well when it comes to reconnecting and fostering that level of friendship again, in hopes that it can get back to somewhere where it was before. And microwaving the friendship can also look like, asking those small talk questions, which I just talked about before. But the goal is you want to be present with someone. That's the most important part of all this, is your presence. And not even necessarily physical, although that would be preferred, physical proximity, but just being able to reconnect with someone and show them that you believe that they are worth your time, because time is the most finite resource we all have, and we all get to choose how we're going to spend it. And as you may or may not know, I reference this study a lot, but Harvard did the longest study. It was 85 years to see and find out what are the key predictors of longevity, so how long of a life you'll live, and how happy of a life you'll live. And they found out at the end of the 85-year study that the most important predictor was not what you ate, though that's important. It wasn't how much you worked out, though that's important. It was the quality and depth of the relationships in your life. And you don't get quality and depth by microwaving anything. And so we need to keep that into our mindset as we are going through this, because connection is a long-term investment. In fact, the University of Kansas did a study to find out how long does it take to make friends. And though we're talking about reconnecting with an old friend, I want to put this in perspective for you. This study found that on average, it takes 90 hours to go from acquaintance to friend. Further, it takes 200 hours to go from acquaintance to close friend. And so I say that because we need to remember that this is going to take a sacrifice of our time in order to reconnect with someone. And we have to be willing to want to do that up front. And we need to put that expectation for ourselves on the table. So connection as a long-term investment, that's point 4. And then the final point, I would say when you're trying to reconnect with someone, a great way to bridge that gap when it comes to changes that have happened in your life and how you're in different phases now is by asking their advice on something that you're currently going through in life. Even if they might not have any context for it, those are sometimes the best people, is people who don't necessarily understand what you're going through, but they're able to empathize and they have a unique perspective because they're outside of it. I think that can always work well. And Adam Grant talks about the power of being able to ask someone for their advice, because ultimately, when you ask someone for advice, it creates an emotional buy-in. We love being asked advice because we love when people feel like they want to hear what we think and they trust our insight enough to make decisions. And so regardless of if you ultimately are going to take someone's advice or not, you want to be able to give them the opportunity to share with you, and then you can decide what you're going to do afterwards. But that element of creating mutual emotional investment is really important when it comes to reconnecting with people, because that, again, bridges that gap and it can help bring you closer to the other person and vice versa as well. Another tip when reconnecting is stay away from using questions that start with why. And simply put, it's because why makes someone feel like they're on the defensive. And instead, phrase questions starting with what or how. As you heard at the top of the episode, I asked 2 questions that started with what. And that can open the dialogue and make someone feel more comfortable sharing what's really going on in their life. The goal of this whole episode is to give you the encouragement to know that, hey, reconnecting with someone doesn't need to feel as weird as we think it does. We get inside of our heads all the time and we let our heads and our brains create stories that aren't true. And ultimately, I think that the gift of clarity is a great gift. And even if it's painful clarity, or if you find out someone doesn't really want to re-engage in the friendship, I would say that painful clarity is so much better than no clarity at all, because you get closure, you get context, you get an understanding that you didn't have otherwise. Is it a risk? Yes, absolutely. And I believe that you are worth that risk every single time, because who knows, on the other side of going first and attempting to reconnect with someone, you might just unlock the friendship that you need most in this season of your life right now. I believe in you. I'll see you next time.